these, and I think the slides will be made available so you can catch up on these. But I did want to mention a couple of things. Asia has led the way in the concept of green growth. And in fact, recently I spent a bit of time in South Korea, and they've really pushed forward in this area. But the ESCARP, the United Nations group ESCARP, have really promoted this concept strongly in the Asian region on the basis that the real opportunity for particularly the developing nations within the Asia-Pacific region are in developing economies that are built around the green movement, basically, and the sustainability movement. And so we have a lot of activities, and in fact I had a whole pile of slides that I took out that analysed some of the things that are happening in China with regard to green growth. But when I went to South Korea, I was bowled over by some of the very progressive stuff that they're doing. This is a statement from the Secretary General of the OECD that makes basically the same arguments as the previous statement, that we need to bring the environmental economic consequences together. But the last thing I thought was even more telling. It's about how we all behave every day of our lives. What we eat, what we drink, what we recycle, reuse, repair, how we produce and how we consume. That needs to be embedded in the kind of economies that we build into the future. This is fundamental, I think, to a sustainable future. And the good news is to hear people like this making these kinds of statements. So what are the characteristics of promising responses when you look out and see things happening in the community? I'll go through these fairly quickly because of the time, but the first one is strategic thinking. Don't get stuck in the notion that the way things have been done in the past is necessarily the right way for the future. If you're in business, that could be a killer. If you take a different view, it could be a winner. Because those who actually step out into those new directions may in fact really beat the way forward. And similarly with leadership. Those who take some risks and be early starters can actually build on the advantage of being earlier starters. The complexity and the uncertainty associated with climate change, but also other issues of sustainability, means that you need to be flexible. You need to actually build into your strategies, again, whether it's private sector or public sector, opportunities to move when decisions you made were didn't turn out necessarily to be the best way of going. So flexibility, being nimble enough to move and not being too embarrassed to move. I've got a few slides about leadership here, and I'll skip through these and I'll just select a couple. These are comments by European leaders, which I'll go over. But I love this one because I was involved with this guy who is the managing director of Bunnings Australia, which is a hardware company, bulk hardware company that exists throughout Australia and New Zealand. And he invited me to a meeting of 600 of his senior staff. He had 600 people in the same room at the same time. He spent a third of the day telling them how he wanted them to come along with him and make business out of sustainability. Mainly water use sufficiency, energy use efficiency. Because people come in to their hardware stores and they want to know what lights to buy, what taps to use, and so on, because they are interested in being more efficient in this way. And then he said, but spent a third of the day talking about the fact that he was going to make his business sustainable. And on the spot, in front of everyone, set energy and water targets that blew me over. And the water target they were able to, I think, achieve relatively easy. The energy target's hard for them. But he set these targets very publicly, and he's sincere about trying to achieve them. But then he spent a third of the day in front of his 600 of his people telling them that he was going to do it himself. And by the time he walked out of there, he had 600 people eating out of his hand. They were going to do what he wanted to do for the business, but they were actually going to come along with him for the ride as well. This is a man who's in his mid-40s, young children, is a leader. We need more of them, particularly from the business community. Another story from a large Australian company, transport company, big transport in Australia. And this was a statement, these are statements from the chairman of Linfox, Peter Fox, who they set a target of reducing company greenhouse gas emissions. This is a company that almost all they do is drive trucks around. They set a target of reducing their emissions by 28%, and they did it 12 months earlier than they thought they would. And the vast majority of their improvement was not about changing technology, it was changing driver behaviour. Fantastic achievement. And what's more, this guy openly provided all the data from their experience to his competitors, because he wanted the whole industry to actually take advantage of this. The derivation of this was his father, because he actually wanted to do this to save money, but he wanted to do it for his grandchildren. Again, a leader who is publicly out there making these statements and making a difference. Alcoa, very good stories associated with them. Let's get on now to the last three characteristics of a promising response. The first one is use markets and use them, but recognise they're not perfect, and try to work with that and use non-market tools as well. The third one really is a reiteration of what I said before, it's reflection. Consider how our expectations, your expectations, really reflect the culture, the history, the training, the education, your own personal background, and that much of those influences are subconscious. And the real power is to bring them into the conscious. And this is, as I said before, about raising in your own mind why you do these things. Why you believe that this is the right way for governments to go or for your company to go. Bring them out. It's empowering to be able to do that. And finally, holism. It's very rare, and I've seen this in presentations of research projects over the last 3 days. It's very rare that someone will come along with a technology that stands alone and makes a whole pile of money and makes a difference to the community. It's usually a balance between a number of different things, like the motor car. How do we actually holistically get outcomes that deliver human health, security of energy supply, mobility, emissions reduction, all together? Holism is very important. It's a new way, I think, of looking at things. That's very important. It's thwarted by the idea that we live in highly sectoralised societies. Those of us who have gone through the process of being trained to generate knowledge, we go into universities and we deliver it from a very narrow disciplinary perspective often. And that's not the way the real world is. Those of us who are in the corporate world will protect our industries as individual industries and may not actually think too much about the broader perspectives. And those in the governments, particularly in the Australian government, will actually protect their own portfolio. This kind of sectoralisation is a killer. It's not the way forward to a sustainable future. So in conclusion, my own view is that the climate change issue may tell us more about our evolution as individuals, as society, and the fact that we're not sustainable than we would like to know. That might be the important message. It's a problem we have to fix up, but the important message might say, hold on, we're at this point in time, we've developed all these systems and they're not going to produce outcomes in the longer term. We need to address that. And finally, the whole thing can be a bit scary. So be careful if your emotions tell you you don't want to hear this, because some of you will. That's the response that some of you will have. It's daunting because it's complex, it's daunting because it's uncertain, and it's daunting because it's all-embracing. Sustainability is about everything we do. But most of all, it challenges the way we think about our own personal success, the infrastructures that we have, and our investments. But change can be a real opportunity to lead the way, build win-win outcomes, and contribute to a world that we wish to leave for our children and our grandchildren.